The red beam sliced through the mountain fog, vaporizing human flesh with a sickening hiss. Nobody in Pine Loop Ridge moved as Darren Holt crumpled to the asphalt, steam rising from the charred hole in his chest. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Aliens were meant for distant stars and conspiracy theories, not executing civilians on Main Street. And then the stranger appeared on the hilltop. Nobody saw him climb. One moment the ridge was empty. The next, a tall figure emerged from swirling mist, dragging 3 objects behind him. A peculiar lamp that gave no light, a worn shovel with strange carvings along its handle, and what looked disturbingly like a severed mechanical head, still blinking blue emergency signals every few seconds. Jackson Bale watched from Betty's cafe, his 4th sigh of the morning freezing in his throat. 2 sips into his bitter espresso, and now he was witnessing what looked like the end of the world, or at least the end of Pine Loop Ridge. The Galactic Patrol ship had descended without warning. No sonic boom, no announcement, just dropped from the clouds like a forgotten toy. These weren't the friendly aliens of childhood stories. These were corporate mall cops with weapons of mass disintegration, here to display the flag and remind Earth of its place in the cosmic hierarchy. Everyone knew the rules. You didn't make eye contact. You didn't cross the street too slowly. But Darren Holt, the eccentric former observatory janitor who talked to pigeons and once tried to pay for groceries with a cassette tape, had done exactly that. One patrol officer had raised a weapon, and Betty dropped her tray of muffins as the flash of light struck Darren clean through. The hooded stranger moved with unsettling purpose straight to Darren's motionless form. The village held its breath as he knelt beside the body, placing his long fingers against Darren's forehead. Well, the stranger muttered, voice like gravel under tires. They started early this time. The patrol officer who fired shouted something in that garbled machine speak they used. The stranger ignored him completely, placing the strange lamp beside Darren's body. He pressed his palm against the charred chest wound and began to hum, a low, electric note that seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath everyone's feet, like a massive power grid awakening underground. Then Darren gasped, choking, sitting bolt upright. His eyes flew open wide with shock. Unauthorized biological restoration detected, screamed the cruiser system, weapons raising again. The hooded man simply lifted his head, and something about that small movement made the patrol officers hesitate. Jackson didn't even notice his espresso cup shattering on the sidewalk as his legs carried him forward, across the space between the cafe and the chaos, before his brain could catch up. Who the hell are you? Jackson found himself asking, heart hammering against his ribs. The hooded figure seemed to expand, suddenly towering over everyone. When he spoke, his voice wasn't the monstrous rumble Jackson expected, but something worse, utterly calm, like a blade being slowly unsheathed. Names are stories we tell ourselves, he said simply. You can call me Ilrich. Jackson pointed at Darren, who was clutching his chest and gasping like a drowning man. He's my neighbor. Thought pigeons worked for Neptune. Ilrich tilted his head slightly. They don't. Meanwhile, the patrol officers whispered among themselves, clearly confused. There was no procedure for this. A revived civilian, unknown technology, a stranger with a shovel. The shooter looked like he was seriously reconsidering his career choices. Darren was now clinging to Ilrich's knees. They knew, he gasped desperately. I told you they knew about the hill. Ilrich gently disengaged the man's grip. Rest, Darren. You've already done more than most ever will. Jackson couldn't stop staring. You know his name? Ilrich turned but didn't answer. Instead, he addressed the patrol officers directly. Your ship's navigation core is corrupted. Look in the override logs planted by an off-grid relay. This wasn't a mistake. It was an execution. The officer who'd fired recoiled as if slapped. Jackson stepped forward. How could you possibly know that? Ilrich turned slowly. Jackson saw eyes that reflected like polished mirrors. Not monstrous, just impossibly, unervingly old. I assisted, Ilrich whispered. A heavy silence fell, broken only by frantic yapping as Muffin, Jackson's neurotic beagle, somehow escaped from the cafe. The dog charged across the street, latching onto a patrol drone's cables with terrifying enthusiasm. Jackson struggled to process the scene. A mysterious stranger with forbidden knowledge, a resurrected man gasping in the dirt, and a patrol squad slowly realizing they might be pawns in something terrible. He hadn't even finished his coffee. "How many sevens?" Jackson asked, mouth suddenly dried. Ilrich's mirrored gaze flicked skyward. "I can confirm 7 cloaked ships circling above us right now. If they attack, this place would burn to ash," Ilrich finished. "I can't control that outcome, but we do have one advantage." He paused. "They believe I'm dead." "That's not exactly consoling," Jackson said. "We turn their presumptions against them." "What's the plan exactly?" "They're not here for justice," Ilrich said, fingers tightening around his shovel. "They're here to delete." Without another word, he strode toward the middle of the street. The severed drone head in his hand blinked faster as he approached the spot where Darren had fallen. He knelt, pressed the drone against the asphalt, and whispered something that made the air crackle with static. The ground beneath him shuddered. Asphalt cracked in a perfect circle, and Pine Loop Ridge's main street split open, revealing stairs descending into darkness. "They hid the entrance here," Ilrich explained, already moving down the steps. "In plain sight, beneath your feet for generations." Jackson hesitated only a moment before following, Muffin at his heels. The patrol officers shouted warnings, but none fired. Too confused or too curious to intervene. The stairway led to a massive chamber that couldn't possibly fit beneath the small town. Metal walls curved up into darkness. Ancient technology humming back to life after what must have been centuries of dormancy. At the center stood a console with spinning rings that looked like a model of the solar system. Ilrich placed the crystal from beneath his cloak into the center of the console. It pulsed weakly, then brighter as the rings sprang into motion, igniting with blue-white light. The earth seemed to shift beneath them, not violently, but as if something deep underground had rolled over in its sleep. The air grew sharp with ozone and whispers. As the rings spun faster, data streams erupted around them. Holographic projections painting across a map of Earth. Images flickered, birth records, ancient broadcasts, a planet's entire hidden history. "What is this place?" Jackson whispered. "A vault," Ilrich said. "One of 7 built to preserve truth when memories fail." Among the flickering images, Jackson spotted a familiar face. His own grandfather, looking younger in a military uniform, standing before a vault still under construction. His voice crackled through the chamber. "It's exactly as you mentioned. But once this is opened, nobody will remember what we did." Jackson staggered backward. "My grandfather? He was part of this, 9C, Ilrich confirmed. "That was his designation. Perhaps you're still standing because it's in your blood." Before Jackson could demand what that meant, the console darkened. The rings halted. A deep bass pulse reverberated through the chamber, shaking dust from ancient corners. "They know we're here," Ilrich said grimly. Above ground, alarms screamed through every wall, vibrating into their bones. The vault just broadcast its existence to every system that's ever touched Earth, Ilrich explained. "Which is unfortunate timing." "How so?" "It depends how quickly we can persuade the rest of the galaxy that destroying Earth would mean destroying the foundation of all the agreements they've ever made." "So what?" "You'll argue with them." "I'll confront them," Ilrich corrected, "and I'll place the truth before them. Let them choose." When they emerged, Pine Loop's residents had begun to gather despite the danger. They didn't know the details, but they could see the sky turning crimson with orbital energy signatures. Patrol reinforcements arriving in formation. Darren was walking the streets, telling anyone who would listen about dying and returning, pointing at the hole in his jacket. Throughout town, people clutched makeshift weapons, baseball bats, kitchen knives, gardening tools. The town, real or not, still existed. And they weren't going to let it vanish without a fight. Muffin growled once, then smugly sat on a fallen drone, chewing its antenna like a victory cigar. Beneath their feet, the vault pulsed again. Above Pine Loop Ridge, the sky split open like a furious egg. Patrol ships descended through swirling clouds, their hulls lit by red and white warning pulses. Their constructions were surgical, heartless, built by something that didn't believe in making mistakes. Ilrich stood beneath them, arms behind his back, cloak whipping in artificial wind. He looked like a man either too exhausted or too clever to be terrified. Jackson stood beside him, heart pounding, trying not to hyperventilate. Muffin snarled at the sky with strange enthusiasm, as if he had a personal grudge against anything that flew. "The vault has awakened Earth's memory," Ilrich said quietly. "The galaxy, or at least the dangerous parts of it, now understands what's happening." "Which is what exactly?" Jackson demanded. "A trial," Ilrich replied. "The loudest courtroom in history. Not in some distant capital, not in high orbit, but right here in your small village on a backwater planet." The vault was broadcasting through relay networks to black box satellites buried for millennia, to unseen recipients and whistleblowers who had never given up the fight for truth. The patrol ships formed an attack pattern overhead, but the first strike didn't come from them. A burst of compressed light, pure electric blue and utterly silent, shot from the mountainside. It struck the nearest patrol dropship, erupted into a perfect sphere of energy, then silently imploded. The ship crashed near the old baseball field. Nobody screamed. Nobody moved. All eyes turned toward the ridge where a single figure stood, too distant to recognize clearly, but holding a staff glowing with the same blue light. Jackson narrowed his eyes. "Please tell me that's one of your friends." Ilrich didn't respond, but something flickered across his face. Recognition or concern. The figure descended the hill with purposeful strides. As he approached, Jackson recognized the uniform of an Earth Defense Force officer, a branch of military that had been disbanded decades ago. "I've intercepted 3 command relays from the lead vessel," the newcomer announced calmly. "Ground units are being deployed. AI has initiated siege protocols. 9C." Jackson whispered, recognizing his grandfather's face from the vault projections, impossibly unchanged despite the decades. The officer nodded once, but didn't explain. Around them, Pine Loop's residents were no longer hiding. They weren't even running. Many were armed only with whatever tools they'd grabbed. Rakes, hammers, sturdy chairs, standing their ground with grim determination. Darren, still shaky from his resurrection, stood on the town hall steps, shouting at a patrol drone about constitutional memory rights. Ilrich raised a hand, utterly calm. "Unless someone fires, no one engages." "Do you expect them to negotiate?" 9C asked skeptically. "I anticipate them," Ilrich replied, then hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, patrol troops disembarked from their ships, weapons raised. Their commander stepped forward, helmet visor darkened. "This sector is under quarantine by order of the Galactic Council. All residents will submit for processing and memory adjustment." "On what grounds?" Ilrich challenged. "Violation of Protocol 7. Preservation of established historical narrative." Ilrich laughed, a sound like distant thunder. "You mean preservation of convenient lies?" The commander's posture stiffened. "Last warning. Submit or face erasure." Ilrich turned to Jackson. "The vault contains proof that Earth didn't volunteer to join the Galactic Commonwealth. It was conquered, its history rewritten, its people manipulated into believing it was their choice. And they're willing to destroy an entire planet to keep that secret." Jackson asked incredulously. "They've done it before," 9C said grimly. The commander raised his weapon. "Target the primary dissident." Before he could fire, the ground trembled again. From beneath the town, blue light erupted in a perfect column, engulfing Ilrich. When it faded, he stood transformed, no longer hooded, his true form revealed. Not human, not alien, but something ancient and terrible that made Jackson's vision swim, trying to comprehend it. "I am Earth's appointed guardian." Ilrich's voice boomed, now resonating from everywhere at once. "Placed here when this world was young. You may have forgotten the old agreements, but the vault remembers." The patrol ship's weapons powered down involuntarily. Their communications systems broadcast on all frequencies. not just to their commanders, but to every inhabited world and range. The truth, unfiltered and undeniable, in the sky above. New ships appeared. Not patrol cruisers, but ancient vessels from species Jackson had never seen documented. Observers, witnesses, judges. The trial has begun, Ilrich announced. Earth's memories against your fabrications. Choose wisely. The commander hesitated, then slowly lowered his weapon. What are your terms? Restoration, Ilrich said simply. Earth's sovereignty recognized. Its true history acknowledged. The Council will never. The Council is watching, Ilrich interrupted, gesturing to the gathered ships above. Along with everyone else you've lied to for centuries. For 3 tense heartbeats, no one moved. Then the commander removed his helmet, revealing features that looked almost human, except for eyes that glowed faintly blue, the same color as the vault's energy. We will withdraw, he conceded reluctantly, pending formal negotiation. As patrol ships began retreating, the townspeople of Pine Loop Ridge stood in stunned silence. Their small mountain community had just become the center of galactic politics, all because a strange man with a shovel had appeared on their hill. Darren approached Ilrich cautiously. I knew they were hiding something. The pigeons told me. Ilrich's form had returned to its hooded human appearance. He placed a gentle hand on Darren's shoulder. The pigeons were partly right. But they don't work for Neptune. Mars, then? Darren asked hopefully. Independent contractors, Ilrich replied with the ghost of a smile. Jackson watched the last patrol ship vanish into the clouds. What happens now? Now, Ilrich said, retrieving his shovel, comes the hard part. Remembering who you really are. 9C, Jackson's grandfather, stepped forward. The vaults were built to preserve truth, but they're also weapons. Knowledge that could tear the Commonwealth apart, or rebuild it honestly, Ilrich countered. Muffin, apparently satisfied with the day's excitement, trotted back to Jackson's side, tail wagging victoriously. Above them, the strange observer ships remained, silent witnesses to whatever came next. Earth's true history, buried for generations, was awakening. And it had started here, in a town too small to matter. Because a man had walked too slowly across a street, and a stranger had appeared on a hill with a lamp, a shovel, and the severed head of a patrol drone. Jackson looked around at his neighbors, ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances, and realized the truth that Ilrich had known all along. Sometimes the smallest places mattered most. Sometimes forgotten towns held the memories that saved worlds. The hooded stranger nodded once to Jackson, as if hearing his thoughts, then turned and began walking back toward the hill. The lamp in his hand finally ignited, casting golden light against the gathering dusk. Pine Loop Ridge would never be the same. But then again, neither would the galaxy.